Hey everybody, welcome to the ChrisTEpps leaving a border or escaping a borderline channel. I'll continue with the family of origin stuff again soon. But, part of this channel's purpose, for me anyway, is to also act as a bit of a confessional or a confessional therapy session, what have you. The themed episodes will, of course, be labeled as such, but tonight I just want to talk about. Well, I guess this could be a themed episode. It is, the markings of a borderline. How to put this? They're faulty memories, right? Things just kind of go down the memory hole with the borderline. And what I mean by that is I want to give you an example here. Okay, now I've been with mine for 16 years. She has... Okay, we had our son about 12 years ago. And for the full run of her pregnancy with him, she was violent to me, and she got more violent as time went on. And there was, nothing I could do about it. I mean, I was really stuck. There was nothing I could do about it, and I knew that at the time. And her parents were living with us in a place that I was paying the rent on. I was working like 70 hours a week, waiting tables and bartending, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was working 6 days a week, and I'd get home, and if I sat down for even a few minutes, I was passing out. I was going to sleep, and she was always trying to keep me up, and she was jealous of the fact that she was jealous of my job and jealous of my coworkers, or so she said, for being able to spend all this time with me and stuff. But it's like I had to work as hard as I did because I was saddled with paying her parents' medical expenses for a time and paying all the bills in the house. I was paying down a $1,200 a month rent, not a mortgage, a rent, and about $300 to $500 a month in utility bills because her parents it was an older house, and they were running the AC or running the heat all the time, depending on the season, And on top of that, food costs for a pregnant woman, 2 other adults that didn't care, a growing male boy who was my stepson, and my stepdaughter, and myself, occasionally when I would actually, eat something at home. So, you tack all these costs onto it, and then you tack on other things such as clothing, school supplies, etc. And, I had to work as often and as frequently as I did just to keep shit paid around there. And of course, I'm the sole breadwinner for 7 people. Her parents had clothing needs too. Parents had medication needs, and so on. And I was just paying everything. I mean, I know how much I made, but I couldn't tell you where any of it went. I was just handing it over and forking it over. And, I was really good at waiting tables and bartending, though. So I made between $300 and $500 a day. Now, I'm having to say a day because I would start my work day at 10 a.m. and I wouldn't be done until, around 1 or 2 in the morning. Because I'd pick up for the bartender when he wanted to leave, so I was bartending on top of it. Bartender usually wanted to get out at around 11. And yeah, I was there until about 1 or 2 a.m., depending on the day of the week. And it was just, it was utter sheer madness. But I did it because I had responsibilities. And I think that to me was the single worst part of what had happened next. Was we went, her parents and her decided quite out of the blue that they were tired of living in the city where we lived, and they wanted to move about 3,000 miles away. Well, I'm sorry. First, they wanted to move 1,500 miles away. We got out to the 1,500 mile away spot, and they decided they didn't want to live there because all of a sudden everybody got very racist, except for me. I didn't even see the city that they had proposed we move to. And then they decided, again, totally on their own whim as a group, that we were going to move another 1,500 miles away. So I was effectively 3,000 miles away from my home city. And, I just said, fine. I had given up by that point. As I said, I was dealing with the violence for the entire pregnancy. We didn't move until after my son was born. But it was about 2 or 3 months after he was born that we actually moved. Well, we got out, and the entire trip, I was dealing with her being violent on me. The entire time that we were out living with her relatives in the 3,000 mile away spot, she was violent on me almost constantly. She started a relationship online with a guy who lived in the city we had just left. Not the 1,500 mile away spot, way back home, 3,000 miles back home. So she decided that she was just going to take the kids, my son included, and go move in with this man. Well, she wasn't working. I was working. Presumably we were on vacation. As far as her relatives that we were staying with were aware, they presumed that we were on vacation and maybe we were going to make a go of it in their city. So, I went to work. I did what I do. I went to work and I worked my butt off. Again, at a waiting bartending job and working at night and during the day doing whatever when I spent the entire month of July of that year just churning out work so that we could afford the tickets to get back home. And we got back home, and the guy didn't want to have anything to do with her. I guess he expected her to leave the kids with me or something. And even though his letters, which she showed me, indicated otherwise, well, we got back home. And we couldn't afford to move in anywhere. Like, the trip had strapped us for cash. We couldn't afford to move in anywhere, and we had bailed, through her parents' insistence, we had bailed on our last lease, and nobody wanted to hand me lease paperwork. And without having about an extra $1,000 or $2,000 in hand, we couldn't just walk into a place anywhere. So we wound up in the homeless shelter. I was able to stay with some coworkers and I managed to get my old job back. But her and the kids wound up in the homeless shelter for the time being because my coworkers were letting me couch crash, but they weren't going to have an entire family in their house. That was unacceptable to them. Well, she insisted that that things would be okay and stuff. And I was glad to be away from her because of the violence and everything. I missed my son, but I still made every opportunity that I could between shifts at this restaurant to get out and see them and, arrange to meet up with them and stuff. And I met this man that they had befriended in the homeless shelter, and he had 2 boys with him. And, she wasn't violent on me when I was actively working my butt off again and getting the money up for us to be able to move into a place. Well, we did get into a place, and we hadn't even been in there a week. And I came home one day, and I lost that restaurant job. The owner's brother was embezzling, and I caught him, and he fired me. He did wind up going to prison later, so little justice in that. But anyhow, I got home and told her, yeah, I just got let go. I'll find work, I'll go do day labor or something. We'll be okay. The rent here is manageable, and it was. And then she dropped the bomb on me and she said, "Oh yeah, by the way, I just had sex with so and so. I'm gonna call him Jack." And she says, "I just had sex with Jack in the kid's bedroom." And I just, my jaw hit the floor because we were sitting in that very bedroom. And, she had been going on for weeks telling me how he was her friend and everything. And, like I wasn't shocked at the fact that she'd done it. I was more shocked at the boldness of it, and telling me and just giving me all the bad news on the day where I had just lost the only job I'd really held for, 2 years at that point. And, I got up from the room and I walked out and I was gonna just leave. And then I saw the kids and I realized who their mother was, what their mother was, and I knew that Jack wasn't going to come along and get a job and work and pay for, his boys and he had no work ethic. There's a reason why he was in the homeless shelter. He was in the homeless shelter because he wasn't working, and his wife went to jail because she was working her butt off and she wound up doing some criminal shit to make ends meet. And she went to prison for a couple years, and I'm sorry, she went to jail for 8 months. That's the truth. And while she was in jail, he was in the homeless shelter with his boys because he didn't want to go get a job. And so yeah, she was getting out she wound up working 2 jobs again when she got out. But in the meantime, I had to act like this guy's friend and act like I couldn't do shit without him around my house and stuff. And I was totally cucked. I was totally cucked out because whenever I protested their relationship or anything, I was beaten up. I knew I wouldn't survive it if the cops showed up. I knew that I'd be hauled off to jail or worse if I put my hands on her. So I just had to let her beat me up. And I dealt with that indignity for the entire 2 years of their relationship. If she wasn't getting her brain screwed out by Jack or drunk or high, she couldn't have a sober moment without wanting to just destroy me. And I did everything I could not to be home, but still try to be home as often as I could to be there for the kids because they needed at least one sober adult around. It's a fact of our current relationship that she denies any of this ever happened. And, the kids, the youngest one doesn't remember any of it, of course, but the 2 oldest ones have put it out of their heads, or they've become their mother's apologists. They are her flying monkeys. And this is something that men need to understand if they're going to go get with a woman like this. The kids are never going to have your back. Okay? Or if they do, it's going to be a rare case. Those are that woman's children. Or if you're getting with a borderline man, those are that man's children. They're not yours. And that's really a hard thing to get your head around when you're trying to figure out, if you want to leave or not. If you don't have biological children with them, then get out. They are not your kids. I know it sucks. You feel the pair bond, but it's not really there, guys. Okay? I have to go. I'm going to pick this up in next lesson, I guess. The denial of violence, maybe we'll call this. I'll figure out something. Thanks. Bye-bye.